Sam Roberts from Portland, Oregon, wrote with a request. He asked if I might go into greater detail about the cognitive changes that produce culturally mature understanding. Being that having a basic sense of what those changes involve is so important to any deep appreciation for what cultural maturity changes make possible. Sounds like a good idea. I've described how cultural maturity is growing up as a species involves changes not just in what we think, but how we think, specific cognitive changes. The phrase I use for those changes, integrative metaperspective, is a mouthful, but it describes what becomes different quite precisely. We find related kinds of changes with the mature stages in any human developmental process, but they happen in a particularly encompassing way with cultural maturity. With these changes at a cultural level, they bring the ability to think more systemically in ways that better draw on the whole of who we are and better appreciate the whole of what we want to understand. Historical perspective helps clarify just what's involved. Integrative metaperspective is new and fundamentally so, but each major new chapter in culture's evolving story has similarly been marked by leaps in how we understand. The leap that brought us modern age thought provides the most pertinent comparison. The new sensibilities introduced with the fresh artistic visions of Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci in the 15th century and later filled out with 17th century conceptual formulations such as Newton's clockwork universe and Descartes' emphasis on rationality as truth's last word, did more than just alter our conclusions. They reflected a whole new kind of understanding, indeed, a new type of conceptual organization. We could summarize what then became different with the simple observation that these changes made possible a new, more from a balcony kind of perspective, what we commonly refer to when we use the word objective. Everything we tend to identify with modern age advancement, the rise of individualism, modern democratic governmental forms, the Industrial Revolution, scientific preeminence, modern higher education, and more personal conceptions of the divine can be understood to follow from the new kind of cognitive organization and the vantage it provided. In a similar way, we can make sense of everything about culturally mature understanding, what it asks of us and why, and also why we might expect the specific changes it describes in terms of changes in the mechanisms through which we make sense of ourselves and the world around us. Integrative metaperspective is related, but also new in fundamental ways. To fully grasp what is new, we need to give attention to both the more stepping back part of integrative metaperspective and the more specifically integrative processes that give us the new depth of engagement needed for mature, wise decision-making. What we step back from has multiple aspects. Most immediately, we step back from ourselves as cultural beings. As we do, we become newly able to recognize culture's previous mythologized parental status and begin to move beyond it. But culturally mature assumptions are not all we step back from. We also step back from internal aspects of ourselves in ways that have not previously been possible. That includes becoming newly conscious of parts of ourselves that before we've projected, whether idealized parts as with love and nationalism, or those we have attributed to people who are different from ourselves, as with bigotry and war. In the end, we step back from the dividing of experiences into opposites that has permeated thought since our beginnings. A further aspect of what we step back from has particular significance as we fully grasp how culturally mature perspective is different from how we have understood in times past. We become newly able to step back from intelligence's multiplicity. Besides the rational, in which we take appropriate pride, intelligence also has other aspects. Creative systems theory emphasizes essential roles, aspects of intelligence that are more emotional, more imaginal, and more reflective of bodily knowing are equally important. It describes how each kind of intelligence works according to different mechanisms and makes different kinds of contributions. Modern age belief made one part of intelligence, the rational, the ideal and understanding's endpoint, with romantic thread and understanding provide rationality's lesser partner in the subjective. But rationality by itself is not enough. And obviously it can't be enough if we look at all that goes into human experience and all that ultimately makes us who we are. Integrative metaperspective affirms the importance of rationality, but it also clarifies how rationality represents only one aspect of intelligence. The stepping back part of cultural maturity's cognitive reordering continues the direction that gave us modern age thought, and also in an important sense completes it. Awareness comes to stand separate from the whole of intelligence systemic complexity, now including the rational. But we can't stop there. This more complete stepping back accomplishes a lot. At least it calls into question the past mythologizing of collective belief. It is what makes postmodern perspective possible. But while stepping back in this way can at first feel exhilarating, it can also feel precarious. At some level, we know that by itself it is not sufficient. Ultimately, we are left feeling strangely distanced from ourselves. We confront the transitional circumstances I noted earlier in describing the limitations of postmodern conclusions. To move forward, we need a further, more integrative kind of change dynamic. Along with more fully stepping back from the multiple aspects of our human complexity, cultural maturity's cognitive changes also involve more directly owning and engaging that complexity. Not only is this more integrative kind of process different from what we have known before, it finds no parallel at all in previous cultural change points. We plumb experience with a fundamentally new kind of depth. In the process, we come to more consciously and more fully embody all that makes us who we are. It is this that produces cultural maturity's specifically systemic outcomes. We need at least a bit of this more integrative kind of processes if we are to make a solid start at getting beyond the absolutist and polarized assumptions of times past. And of particular importance for the task of rethinking how we think. We need this second part of cultural maturity's cognitive reordering if we are to deeply engage intelligence's multiple aspects. With integrative metaperspective, we are better able to recognize the world's rich complexity because we come to more consciously and more fully draw on this larger complexity in ourselves. I've described how the image of a box of crayons helps get us to where integrative metaperspective takes us. With integrative metaperspective, we become newly able to step back from the diverse aspects of human understanding, in particular polarities, interplane manifestation, and intelligence's multiplicity, all the hues that make up human sensibility. And at once we become able both to more deeply access this complexity of hues and to draw on the various aspects in the most creative ways. We more consciously acknowledge and more directly draw on the whole of ourself as systems, all the crayons in the box. With time, cultural maturity's cognitive reordering makes whole box of crayons perspective seem like common sense. Fully understanding all that integrative metaperspective involves takes some committed reflection, but the effort is well rewarded. Again, I look forward to your thoughts and your questions.